Okay, so welcome everybody. I'm going to open the meeting. It's just now 6 o'clock. If we could have a roll call, please.
Councilmember Edwards.
Here.
Councilmember Hagley.
Here.
Councilmember Kelly. Here. Vice Mayor Herod.
Here.
Mayor Mitchell.
Here, thank you. And if you could join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Excuse me. Report on closed session. We did have a closed session and no action was taken. And now we'll go on to announcements and presentations. We have the badge pinning of Fire Inspector Hailey Duffy. Chief Boaz.
Good evening, Mayor Mitchell, council members, city staff, members of the public. I'm Jason Boaz, Fire Chief, and I'm here with Inspector Duffy. And today we're honored to officially welcome Hailey Duffy as our newest fire inspector for the City of Healdsburg Fire Department. This position was made possible, as you may recall, through Measure H funding and is a testament to our community's continued commitment to fire and life safety. Hailey has already made a tremendous impact on our community, conducting fire and life safety inspections for over 100 businesses in Healdsburg, ensuring the safety of our residents and our visitors. As we launch our new wildfire mitigation inspection program, which you'll hear more about soon, Hailey will play a key role in strengthening our community's resilience. His journey in the fire service began as a volunteer with Gold Ridge Fire from 2015 to 2019. He graduated from the Santa Rosa Junior College Fire Academy and EMT program in 2015. He went on to serve with CAL FIRE from 2016 to 2019 and worked at Kaiser Permanente from 2019 to 21. Most recently, he's been working as a fire inspector with the City of Oakland Fire from 21 to 24. His dedication to the profession is evident in his certifications, earning his ICC Fire Inspector certification in 2022 and his California State Fire Marshal Fire Inspector 1 certification in 2023, as well as his firefighter and EMT certifications. Since joining our team, Hailey has proven to be a positive force within the department, seamlessly integrating into our crew and our staff, and he's proven to be a great representative for the fire department and the city out in the community. A longtime Sonoma County resident of over 20 years, Hailey is deeply connected to this community. He's a self-proclaimed foodie. He also dedicates his spare time to MMA competition and fitness, in case you can't tell, which are important aspects of his life. Today, we are also honored to welcome his mother, Diana Cortez, and his grandmother, Dora Cortez, who are visiting from Rosarito, Mexico, and made the trip up here to celebrate this proud moment with him. So please join me in congratulating Fire Inspector Hailey Duffy, who will now be pinned by his mother and his grandmother.
Yeah. Good.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Thank you. So moving along here, we have a proclamation recognizing March 16 through 22, 2025 as National Surveyors Week in the City of Healdsburg. And Councilmember Edwards will read the proclamation.
A proclamation of the City Council of the City of Healdsburg declaring the week of March 16th through 22nd, 2025 as National Surveyors Week in the City of Healdsburg. Whereas surveying has been an essential element in the development of human environment since the beginning of recorded history and its requirement in the planning, execution of nearly every form of construction, with its most familiar modern use in fields of transportation, building and construction, communications, mapping, and the definition of legal boundaries for land ownership. And in order to accomplish their objectives, surveyors use elements of engineering, physics, mathematics, astronomy, law, and history. And whereas since the colonial days in the United States, surveyors have been leaders in the community, statesmen, influential citizens, and shapers of cultural standards. For notably, surveyors like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, Lewis and Clark, Daniel Boone, and Henry David Thoreau, among many others. And whereas many services are now provided through the use of sophisticated surveying equipment and techniques, including satellite-borne remote sensing devices and automatic positioning, measuring, recording, and plotting equipment. And whereas the establishment of the week of March 16 through 22, 2025 is National Survey Week, it's fitting tribute to all surveyors. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Healdsburg hereby declares the week of March 16th through the 22nd, 2025 is National Surveyors Week in the City of Healdsburg.
Thank you. Before all of the fire department people leave, I want to make sure if you could stick around until after the proclamation so we can get pictures of everybody. Okay, good. Thank you. And so for this, we have Sonoma County chapter of the California Land Surveyors Association members, Bruce Johnson and Monica Wingate. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Mitchell.
Push the button so.
Thank you, Mayor Mitchell, council members, city staff for this recognition. Surveyors, as you mentioned in the proclamation, have been very important throughout history. And there's a bit of a joke among surveyors that Mount Rushmore has 3 surveyors and some other guy up there. Surveyors do a lot on a daily basis. We're often the ones you see standing out in the middle of the street looking through scopes and wondering, no, we're really not taking pictures except when we are. We do have equipment that will scan and take pictures in a 360-degree arc, as well as satellites and other equipment that we use, hopefully to make sure that when you want to build an addition on your house, it stays where it's supposed to be and not 3 feet into your neighbor's property. That's causing more money. Anyway, thank you very much. On behalf of the Sonoma County chapter and the State California Land Surveyors Association, we appreciate this recognition. Thank you.
Thank you. And stick around for pictures after. Thank you. And so now we have another proclamation, Arts and Culture Creativity Month proclamation. Councilmember Kelly.
A proclamation of the City Council of the City of Healdsburg declaring April 2025 Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month in the City of Healdsburg. Whereas the arts, culture, and creativity are essential components of human expression that build community, engage youth, create jobs, advance social justice, and reflect our collective identity, history, and values. And artists, cultural organizations, and creative individuals serve to give voice to our many communities, fostering enrichment, inspiration, understanding, empathy, and dialogue across diverse perspectives. And recognizing the importance of supporting the arts, culture, and creativity in all its forms enhances the well-being, health, and economic development and cultural vitality of our society. And the California Legislature adopted Senate Concurrent Resolution number 33 on April 5th, 2019, proclaiming April 2019 and every April thereafter as Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month. And in 2021, an additional SCR 40 was declared to recognize artists as second responders. And whereas on August 16, 2021, the City Council of the City of Healdsburg adopted an Arts and Culture Master Plan to guide our community in enhancing arts, culture, and creativity here in Healdsburg. Whereas on October 7, 2024, the City Council created the Arts and Culture Commission of the City of Healdsburg to build community through arts and culture and promote all arts and creativity throughout Healdsburg to enrich the artistic culture of our region of Sonoma County and beyond. Healdsburg artists and culture bearers continue to play critical roles in disaster responses and community recovery efforts by revitalizing our neighborhoods, restoring social bonds, and harnessing the power of creativity as part of the healing process. And we encourage all residents to engage with and celebrate the arts, culture, and creativity in their communities and to support the continued growth and accessibility of these invaluable resources for present and future generations. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Healdsburg hereby recognizes April 2025 as Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month in the City of Healdsburg. And Gina Reiner is here to accept the proclamation. Welcome.
Thank you. It's been a long journey the last several years, and it's very exciting to be up here to accept the proclamation on behalf of the new 7-member Art and Culture Commission. And I'd like to dedicated to two artists that we lost recently, Joyce Power and Jandala. And we will carry on the work that they have done over the years and all the art and culture contributions that they have made. And we look forward to working with you very much on advancing and forwarding the art and culture initiatives in the city of Healdsburg. Thank you so much for the proclamation.
Thank you, Gina. And one more proclamation, proclamation declaring March 31st, 2025 as Cesar Chavez Day. Vice Mayor Herod will read this.
Thank you very much. A proclamation of the City Council of the City of Healdsburg declaring March 31st, 2025 as Cesar Chavez Day in the City of Healdsburg. Whereas in his time, Cesar Chavez witnessed a booming economy that served those at the top, yet left millions of hardworking Americans behind. This year, on what would have been his 98th birthday, we summon his courage and moral clarity to guide us as we face the ongoing challenges of the pandemic, a deeply unequal economic crisis, and a long overdue national reckoning on racial and economic justice. And whereas his legacy as the founder, together with Dolores Huerta of the United Farm Workers of America, reminds us of the central place that organizing and collective bargaining holds in advancing the dignity and well-being of working individuals. And whereas in Healdsburg, we are reminded of the deep debt and gratitude to our farm and agricultural workers, many of whom are indigenous, working tirelessly, growing, harvesting, and packaging food that is not only vital to our residents and our economy, but also to our region, county, and state. And whereas increasingly farm workers in our region are experiencing unhealthy air quality due to the impacts of climate change, fueled wildfires, and recognizing that the County of Sonoma has an opportunity to lead by creating a formal policy addressing farm workers' safety in wildfire evacuation zones. And whereas Cesar A. Chavez stayed true to his convictions, farm workers fasted, they marched, they organized, and brought hope to many campesinos here in Sonoma County and so many beyond. And whereas today, La Causa lives on and building upon the work of Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, there's work that has yet to be done here at home. Sonoma County exists as an agricultural hub in the intersection of hospitality, wine, and tourism. Farm workers deserve language justice, hazard pay, and disaster insurance as these tragic wildfires continue to affect our communities. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Healdsburg hereby declares March 31st, 2025 as Cesar Chavez Day. We call upon all of our community members to observe this day as a day of action, learning, building community, and creating education programs that honor Cesar Chavez.
Thank you. So how about we get Haile and his family and your coworkers up here for a picture? Would that be good? Did I see you at one of my clients the other day? You at Jacob's office? I worked there. Oh. Congratulations, thank you. Okay. Oh, okay. Morning.
That's why I bought the $4 tie. You know?
Okay, thank you. That was fun. So now next up is the city manager reports.
Thank you, Mayor. I have just a couple things to note this evening. Thanks to everybody involved in the celebration this morning. Obviously, for St. Patrick's Day, it's already been a long day for some folks, but certainly fun, and it's a great event and something I know we all look forward to. So a lot of thanks to everybody who did work and was up even earlier than the rest of us to get out there and get everything settled. So thanks to them. I had a couple of other events I just wanted to note. One is a reminder that next week on the 26th at 5:30 p.m. at the police department is the annual military equipment meeting. You'll recall from the police chief's annual report a couple of meetings ago that this is an annual requirement now of state law that certain types of equipment need to be reported annually, and the council approved that action previously. And also that the city needs to hold a meeting. Historically, I think somebody asked about attendance at those meetings, and historically it's been light. I'd say one reason for that is that we haven't really made any changes in recent years to that equipment. So it's a meeting that each year looks like those that we've had in the past. Nevertheless, that creates a really good opportunity if there are people who have questions about police equipment, how it's used, how it's managed. This is an opportunity to come and have a dialogue with the police department. I might even go so far as to say with a sparsely attended public meeting, it's a great time to go and interact with the police department in general and ask questions and provide some feedback. So I know they would welcome that. And again, as a reminder, that's next week on the 26th at 5:30 at the police department. And then a little further out, but something I just wanted to put on your calendars is that we are working on a small celebration to celebrate the naming of the Abel de Luna Community Center. The council took that action a few months ago, and you may have noticed we've already started implementing that new name for the community center on collateral and printed material. When there's an event there, you will receive updates for something at the Abel de Luna Community Center. So that's already taken place, but of course we wanted to celebrate that with former Mayor De Luna and his family. So we are looking at May 18th. I'm looking to Mark to nod and confirm. May 18th. That's a Sunday for a celebration there. We are just beginning to work out the details, so I don't have a timing for you yet. Rest assured, we'll have more information. But that was agreeable to both our team and the family. So I wanted to share that right now and just let you know that we are putting some effort into having something fun that weekend at the community center to celebrate that naming. And I think that's all I have, so I'm happy to take questions. Otherwise, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Does anybody have questions for the city manager? No. Getting off easy today. Okay, so next up is the public comment on items on the consent calendar and non-agenda items. This time is set aside to receive comments from the public regarding matters of general interest not on the agenda, but related to city council business. Pursuant to the Brown Act, however, the City Council cannot consider any issues or take action on any requests during this comment period. Is there anybody who would like to make general? Please come up to the podium. Welcome. And push the button so the green light is lit so we can, there you go.
Okay. Not very good at public speaking.
You want to put the mic a little closer?
Okay. How's that?
That's great. Thank you.
All right. I'm coming in regards to a planning commission meeting that I went to last Tuesday, where the planning commission decided to raise a house on Matheson Street and replace it with a modern structure. I'm going to read from my notes because otherwise it isn't going to work out. I went to the planning commission meeting. They approved the demolition and replacement of a house on 317 Matheson Street. It's in the heart of a historic district. It will be replaced by a modern structure. The planning commission used a report from Evans and DeShazio to prove that it was non-historic. By their definition, almost a third of the houses in that district are not historic. So they could also be raised by this same motion. A historic district means don't touch, don't alter. There are laws in place to prevent that. Everybody who lives on that street, including myself, is encumbered the don't do this, don't do that to your house. The property owners have owned this place and rented it for 28 years. They knew that this was an historic district. And they also knew that it would be difficult to make changes. So they hired an architect who just happened to be on the planning commission, and they were rewarded for their efforts. Even though Mr. Perlman recused himself from the vote and the discussion, it was very obviously when we went into the meeting that it was a done deal. So the pond had been poisoned before we even came to the meeting. I think Mr. Perlman should be removed from the commission because I think it was a blatant conflict of interest. And there's no other reason for this to happen. There's been no house raised in this district in history. This would be like the first one. So that's what I got to say.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Is there anyone else who'd like to make a public comment on non-agenda items? Not seeing anyone. We'll bring it back. So we're on to the consent calendar. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and now public hearings. Dry Creek Commons Affordable Housing Project. Housing Director Steven Sotomayor will present.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Steven Sotomayor, Housing Director for the City of Healdsburg. Today we have Tax Equity and Financial Responsibility Act, or TEFRA hearing, which is a requirement in order to issue tax-exempt bonds, similar to what we had prior for Saggio Hills. Next slide. The action is requested today is to conduct a Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act public hearing and adopt a resolution approving the issuance up to $35 million in tax-exempt bonds through the California Municipal Finance Authority to finance or refinance the Dry Creek Commons project. Today, I do have representatives from both CMFA as well as Burbank Housing in case there are any questions. But this is a procedural hearing, as I will explain a little bit further in the next slide. So Burbank is seeking for the Dry Creek Commons project maximum amount up to $35 million to finance the Dry Creek Commons housing project. This today is, I want to make clear, not the city taking out any bonds or any loans or having fiscal responsibility for it, but rather it's a hearing that's required by the IRS to have a hearing within the jurisdiction that those tax exempt bonds will be spent. It is no obligation of the city. In fact, the city will get a contribution out of these bond proceeds to put in towards their general fund as CMFA provides money back through the issuance of this. But it is Burbank Housing that will be taking on these bonds for the project. This adoption of this resolution does not obligate the city to provide any financing or anything beyond the commitments that we've already made. And this does not affect any other considerations along with the development agreement. Rather, at a future meeting, we will be seeking council's approval for additional financial assistance to the 155 Dry Creek project from Measure S, but that will be at a later date and is not necessarily contingent upon this. Next slide. Just some key points about the project is that back in April of 2021, we entered into an exclusive negotiation agreement with Burbank Housing for the development of the lot that the city's RDA purchased. Generally, we refer to this as just right next to Big John's on Dry Creek. It will be 58 units, 57 of which will be deed restricted as affordable. The units will serve households earning between 30% and 60% of the area median income, which is definitely needed for some of the service jobs. And one thing to mention here is the amount of money that's been leveraged against this, not just the bonds themselves, but there's also the donated land through the RDA purchase, which is the city leveraging its resources to get affordable housing. Burbank Housing was proactive in going after federal grants that come through our Community Development Commission in the county. They were able to get $1 million of that. They have a pending award for the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Multifamily Housing Program. I got that one out pretty good, but that one is pending, which would bring an additional $8 million to the project. Sonoma County Home is another federal grant that you can receive through competitive processes through the CDC. And then finally, the bulwark of this in a large grant that's very timely and applicable is the HCD CERNA grant, which is the Joe CERNA Farm Worker Program, in which some 27 of these units will be reserved for those that work in the agricultural fields. And that is a grant that helps bring down the cost of the project. As you can see, it's heavily leveraged. And as I mentioned before, we will return to council in April seeking an additional funding source of $1 million to complete the project's capital stack. And the good news out of this is the TEFRA hearing puts us in a position where Burbank can issue these bonds once they are put forward, and we can get started on this project very soon. Next slide. And so that takes us back to the action requested. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I have representatives from Burbank and California Municipal Finance Authority in case there are any. Otherwise, the public hearing is part of the process to issue these bonds. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Do we council questions? No? So
Mayor and council, I've never done this before and I can't believe I'm doing it, but we have 17 minutes until a time certain next item public hearing. So I'm encouraging if you have any questions or comments.
we can do this quickly, I think.
We of course could, or we could take council member comments. We could take a break. So there's no emergency here. But truly, if you have questions
We've got plenty
about
of
the
time.
project,
Thank you.
you've got time.
So 6:45 is when it starts. Okay. Ron, do you have
Yeah, I
something to say?
wanted to and that we were compensated for this, just like Saggio Hills, we were compensated for that. Do we know what the compensation on this one is? A rough thing?
So roughly from this issuance of this bond, we would receive $13,912. That's not roughly, that's the exact amount. But
so that 13,000 is for having this hearing in a public setting.
Correct. And I believe that's part of the nature of this JPA is that they like to put money back to the jurisdiction in which it is. It's part of their commitment. So we actually are receiving funding out of this, but not only that, we are receiving the bulwark of the financing for the Dry Creek Commons project. Normally, you know, projects like this go after 9%. This is just a different way to do it through the issuance of bonds. And as you can see, it takes multiple funding sources to put these together, multiple years. And Burbank's been plugging away at that and bringing in money piece by piece. But this will combined with the CDBG disaster recovery, will be the final piece in putting this project together.
And then when we're doing these fundings, this is not coming out of the general fund. Where is the money that we will be putting in this source from?
So I'll be returning to council asking for $1 million to put towards the project out of our Measure S fund, which is 2% of our TOT tax, or the transit occupancy tax, that we collect through hotel stays that are here in the city.
All right, thank you for clarifying that.
Vice Mayor?
What's the history of that money from the Measure S fund? I mean, how long has it been earmarked and projected? It's not something that you were looking at yesterday, right? So I'd just like to get a little bit of history of that.
No, so the money that the council made a commitment through a council meeting for the $1 million, I want to say just short of a year ago, towards the project. I can't remember the exact date, but that was a commitment in order to apply for different funding sources to show that they had the financing available. We have not formally done a loan document or a deed of trust or any of those. When we do come back, we'll have that as part of the process to set the terms for that loan. I believe that's scheduled for April 17th for the City Council.
Councilmember Kelly?
Can you talk about the tax credit financing, the competitive grant program that this project has applied for, and the cycles of grant funding, and kind of how our projects are shaping up? Are we getting those tax credit financing competitive grants approved, or how are we looking in comparison to other projects in cities? And do you feel like it's a challenging market to figure out how to finance affordable housing?
It is, and I think the one thing that you can take a look at is how many different sources were required to put this project together. You know, an example is, for example, the 9% tax credits, which is the largest program to the low-income housing tax credit generated through the federal government setting aside tax and being able to set aside revenues for that and then pass down through the state programs. These 9% are twice a year, is that you get a chance to apply for them, and they're extremely competitive. I believe that this would be at Burbank Housing, and we do have Jocelyn Lynn from Burbank, but I believe that was 2 rounds that were applied for previously for Dry Creek. Both times we came very close, but there's something called a tiebreaker. And the more money that a jurisdiction puts into a project, for example, if you're a jurisdiction that can put in $4 million as opposed to $1 million, you get extra points at the end. Most of these projects come out with the maximum amount of points that you can get, but when you look below the line of who didn't get funded, it's a huge list. And, you know, we applied in the rural set aside, we applied for different types of programs that make you more competitive, but that truly speaks at how competitive it is right now. And I think one of the challenges that we face going forward in the future is that tax credits rely on corporations needing tax credits. And if the corporate tax rate structures are lowered or tax rate, or there's more incentives through tax breaks, generally what we saw last time is that what we call syndication, or the selling of the tax credits, gets lower and lower, which reduces the amount of equity that can be generated through the tax credit program. So I would say right now, having 2 projects that are fully funded and ready to go, construction in the spring or summer, is in a very auspicious position, because the future of affordable housing financing is starting to look a little bit more bleak compared to what it used to be in an already very competitive environment.
And given that the financing looks bleak, do you think that the state will take pity on us and give us a smaller allocation under what we're required to build in the next regional housing needs allocation or RHNA cycle? Or are we going to be tasked with building the same or more units with less money potentially?
So I've never seen a city's RHNA allocation go down in my career. I would say that, you know, this really speaks to the process of when they develop the new regional housing needs. It's done at the state issues the need to the jurisdiction. In this case, it would be the Association of Bay Area Governments. And then those meetings, as you're aware, they divvy it out based upon formula. I think This year, one of the things that was mentioned at one of our housing element work group meetings that I thought was very well placed was the advocacy around RHNA to make sure that the numbers that we receive reflect truly the need of the community. You know, a lot of issues like transportation and accessibility to work and what jobs are within that area and what economic opportunities are within a certain city often can get lost in the fact that we are just, you know, a smaller city and a giant pool of the Association of Bay Area Governments. And the louder our voice in that, I think the quicker that we get ahead of that, the more that maybe we can match those to our needs. But to answer your question directly, I highly doubt that we would see a drop in our actual 7 cycle numbers.
When do you anticipate this project would be completed? I know it's up to Burbank and their contractor, but when do you anticipate people potentially moving into Dry Creek Commons?
I'd like to get that directly from Burbank, just to make sure I don't misrepresent it. If we could have introduce Jocelyn, then
The question was, when do we anticipate this building being constructed and completed and residents moving?
So that's a good question. So we are looking to close on our construction financing in July of this year. And then we are looking at an 18-month construction timeline from the end of July. So if I do my math, sometime in the spring of 2027.
Great, thank you.
Vice Mayor.
I might have saved this question for later, but we're asking questions tonight. So, what? Yeah, okay. I'll slow down. Is there any amount of money that's put aside for the protection or the enhancement of the creek that runs alongside it there? I mean, I was just looking at the slide and the creek looked very different from what it looks like right now. And I was wondering if is there going to be changes there? Or I'm sure there's going to be a good hard look at the environment of this area and so on. But just wondering if there's a certain portion of the money is set aside to shore up the side of the creek bed or whatever.
So I know that there was extensive work done into that. Once again, I'm going to ask Burbank. I wouldn't know exactly how that would be partitioned out, but perhaps might just stay up here with me, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe I'll do that. Yes, so there are wetlands on site and there is the creek on site. And so we've actually been working with the regulatory agencies, the resource agencies on getting the permits to do the development on this site with the idea that we would be protecting the wetlands. And so one of the things that was required as part of our project is that we would be providing mitigation in terms of long-term mitigation, for the wetlands and for the creek bank. And we've built that into our budget to be able to provide the resources to do that. And I think we have to engage with a certain land conservancy agency that will be doing the stewardship and making sure that we maintain the mitigation efforts. So.
And I'll add to that the design was, one of the challenging things that we used to joke about this project, that it was a wetlands project with an affordable housing project on it. There was definitely a lot of consideration given to that, and the preservation of that space was integrated into it so that area remains free. You can see it in how it's laid out. It's very condensed as opposed to being spread out across the site. It keeps a much smaller footprint.
Any more further questions? No? Thank you. So we'll open up the public hearing then to public comment. Does anybody wish to make comments on this item? Not seeing anybody rush to the podium. So we'll bring it back to council for more questions, comments. We have 5-7 minutes. We have to kill time at this point, right?
Make a comment. We have to start the next public hearing at 6:45. If this one's wrapped up, I do not want to overly force it. Just wanted to give you a chance.
Okay. Councilmember Hagley had a question, comment?
Yeah, I'm ready to make a motion, but I did want to just kind of highlight as part of this is as part of our 5-year capital improvements plan is the roundabouts at Dry Creek and 101. And I do think it's really important that we do focus on that as we're moving forward, because I know that Dry Creek Road does tend to back up in the afternoons for a short period of time. In the morning, I'd take my daughter to go out feed her pigs, and as I'm driving back, I see all the people backed up coming into town at 6 a.m. and 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the afternoon, they're all headed back the other direction, which tells me we don't have enough housing. But the other part of that is we need to make sure that we have, the traffic flows like it's intended there. So that's something I think we need to keep in mind to make a priority. So.
I just wanted to respond to that and totally agree. I think that area of town, as we see more development and, the full people moving into North Village and it being constructed in the Burbank project, both here and Burbank project at North Village, additional, 100 apartments plus the condos at North Village. We're going to see a lot of additional residents using that entrance to town and the freeway on-ramps. We are in the process of submitting our project list that the council has previously reviewed to the Sonoma County Transportation Authority, which is the funding entity that'll be allocating funds for the Dry Creek Road interchange. And it is on our project list. And I believe, knock on wood, we're going to get funding for it this cycle, not to construct the roundabouts, but to start the design process. So I think as we've had those conversations over the past few years and continuing to keep that as a priority on our council, project priority list, it's going to start happening, which is very exciting.
It sure is. Thank you. So would someone like to make a motion?
I'd like to move that we adopt a resolution approving the issuance of up to $35 million in tax exempt bonds for the California Municipal Finance Authority to finance or refinance the Dry Creek Commons project.
Second the motion.
Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Edwards,
Yes.
Councilmember Hagley,
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod,
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Director Sotomayor. Appreciate that. I don't think I've ever seen a TEFRA hearing take this long before, right? Very thorough, yes. So we have 4 minutes, it looks like, to take a break before the next public hearing. So we'll just take a break. You can't hear me. Oh, there we go. So it is now 6:45 exactly. So we're going to start our second public hearing, which is actually the fourth public hearing to receive community input and provide direction to staff regarding the submitted draft maps, the map to be used as the basis for an ordinance, and sequence of elections for district-based council elections. City Manager Kay will introduce.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be very brief. You just set it up. This is 4 out of 5, as the council I know is very well familiar at this point. 5 public hearings are required as part of this process. So we are in the home stretch. You'll obviously see that schedule in just a moment in Paul's presentation. But the intent this evening is to zero in on the finish line with the expectation that we would conclude with the 5th public hearing on April 7th. That would, of course, allow us to meet the deadline, including an extension that was granted to complete this process. So far, it feels like we're trending in that direction, but obviously we will see how tonight goes and adjust as necessary. But we look forward to hearing your feedback on the maps that were discussed at the last public hearing. And as you noted in the title of that item, it's our hope to reach a short number. We had, I think, described it as a map to be included in an ordinance. You'll hear tonight there is some flexibility in how that might come together, but the hope is to get this close enough that we can present to you something that this council feels good about to vote on and conclude the process, or at least with the first reading of the ordinance at the next public hearing, which is the next city council meeting. So with that, I'll turn it over to Paul Mitchell, our demographer, to walk you through the presentation.
Is it on now? All righty. I was just saying it's nice to see you all here in person. And I'm not wearing any green, but hopefully that doesn't ruin our luck of the Irish. Oh, I've got to wear. There's always a first in redistricting, so this is the first time I've been done up. This is, as I mentioned the first time I came here, the most important hearing is really the 4th hearing, because this is a hearing where we want to kind of reach conclusions and get to a point where we can present a map for the public to be, making a decision on at your next meeting. I'll briefly discuss the things I've talked about before in regards to how districting works. Then we'll go over public maps, the draft maps that we constructed at our last hearing, go through the public hearing schedule. I'm going to bring up something that we haven't talked about in depth, which is the numbering and sequencing process, because that's about the point where we're at right now to make sure we're aware of how that works, and then go through what's next. So when we draw districts, one of the key things we're trying to do is create equally balanced districts so that people who are the residents of the city have 2 things: equal representation, meaning they all have access to council members or elected officials that they can take their issues to, and equal voting power, so that they all have the ability to elect candidates and that somebody's voting power isn't diluted because they're in a district with a ton of people versus somebody in a district with very few people. Districts need to be contiguous, meaning whole parts. Now, you do have what they call islands, which are areas of the city that are non-contiguous parts, and we'll draw those to the closest neighboring district. But overall, we want to make sure that those districts are contiguous, they don't hop and jump around. We want to maintain communities of interest, and that is a critical part of this process, because with all the math and data and laws around redistricting, we really want to make sure that the heart of it is the community and the different groups and individuals who might have different issues depending on where they live, the socioeconomic status, their housing status, apartments, single-family homes, people who have different issues that might come before the city. And if anybody wants to go back and watch the last hearing, there's a great conversation about balancing the numeric side of districting, like the numbers on the citizen voting age population data and the numbering of the populations, and the community of interest discussion around, I think it was Healdsburg Avenue discussion. Balancing those things is the process, and you guys did a great job of it at the last hearing if anybody wants to go back and watch that. And then drawing districts that are easily identifiable, that follow natural boundaries, and that for residents, they say, oh, that makes sense. And you'll see in the maps, you have kind of an, oh, that makes sense, Western District as an example. So the idea that the maps kind of have those easily identifiable and boundaries that make sense to residents. Finally, the lowest ranked criteria, but a criteria is that districts are compact. And in California, compactness is defined as these districts don't bypass some nearby population to go get some far away population. So if you had a district that started on one side, took a little sliver of a line across the entire city and then went and got population on the other side, that would be not compact district. And I think as we've drawn lines, the lines have seemed compact, not only in keeping neighborhoods that are together, adjacent neighborhoods together, but also travel compactness. We talked about that with the addition of the presidential circle portion to the southern part of the Western District we'll talk about. That was about having districts that were compact. There were 8 new maps submitted before the 7-day posting deadline, and most of those were revisions of maps that we've actually been looking at. And all the maps that were drafted, the draft maps we have, any of those can be uplifted in this process. We could do some of what we did last time if we felt we needed to in terms of doing some live line drawing. At the last hearing, you went through 2 revisions of maps. One was a revision of map C, and one was the creation of a new map from a publicly drawn draft map that you brought up for some discussion and some adjustments. This first one, C2, was actually at the tail end of your meeting, a little bit out of order in terms of how you created them, but still, this is the revision of map C. And it has a total population deviation of 8%, which is within that 10% boundary. Remember, smaller deviations aren't necessarily that much better. It's really just, is it under 10% deviation? It creates a compact northern district. It creates a western district that's long. It creates 2 central districts and an eastern district. And that green district in this map, that longer district on the west, is the one that is the roughly 30% Latino district. And this is what it looks like. Now, it was built off of Plan C, and you can see the differences are really in that District 4. Coming down and capturing the area around the southern entrance of the city, the river, and in adding that additional portion of District 4, we only added 50 people. So it wasn't a lot of population, even though in size it looks kind of significant. In terms of population, it was relatively small. And you can see that as we went from one to the other, we didn't have to make any other adjustments to the other parts of District 4 because it was still within deviation. This is the total data sheet. The top part of the data is the decennial census data. The bottom part of the data is the citizen voting age population. And as you can see, in the top data, the most important thing to look at is the green is the most overpopulated district at 3.4. The red is the most underpopulated district at -4.6, making that 8% deviation. And in the bottom table, you can see that District 2 is at 31.2% Latino citizen voting age population. Now, draft map D has some significant similarities. It has a population deviation of 6.3, and it was a product of the discussion that we had after the council asked for a publicly drawn map to be elevated, and we started making changes in that hearing. And this is what we came up with. Now, again, that map, there are some similarities. Most similar is District 1, coming from the Chiquita all the way down to Presidential Circle. And it does a different construction of the central districts. And obviously that green district number 2 is a little bit different. If we look at the deviation, that's that total population deviation in the colored boxes. In the citizen voting age population of District 1, 29.6% citizen voting age population for the Latino district. And that's C2 here, and that is draft D. So you can see small differences in the Western District. You can see the central districts go all the way across. And the most significantly changed district really is that district number 2. Well, 3 and 4 are also different. So where we're at right now is we had the first hearing, which is the first public hearing where I spoke for like an hour, going over all the nuts and bolts of districting. And that hearing is still available for people to watch if they want to go through and learn all the technicalities of how districting works. Public hearing 2 was a shortened version of public hearing 1. The public outreach hearing was on January 16th. The last hearing that I was here for was the one where we did a lot of live line drawing, public hearing 3. That's again a good one to watch because both of these maps, we went through a lot of discussions, street level discussions about how to make adjustments to these maps. And then April 7th will be the hearing where you'll have a final vote. And ideally it's a final vote on one map so that the public can see what that one map looks like. They can really dive in and look. You can get real good public comment on that map and feel confident as you make your final vote. Now, sequencing is an important part of this process, and we leave it to the end largely because this is an area where you might want to think about some of the more realistic aspects of districting and how these elections are going to carry out going forward. It's correct that you'll have 2 seats up in 2026 and 3 seats up in 2028. What's going to happen is a little bit weird in that you are an at-large elected city council, and in 2026, you're going to convert to essentially a hybrid city council, where you're going to have 2 council members elected by districts, and the other 3 still were elected at large. If there was a vacancy among any of those 3, you would have a replacement among an at-large, for an at-large council seat, not for whatever district is in the future in 2028. After the 2028 elections, you will all be in districted elections. Everybody will be representing a district. The sequencing will determine which one of these districts come up in any given election cycle. Now, when we do districting in a 5-district council like this, we recommend doing even districts and odd districts. And that's how most counties like having their district elections done. So one election cycle, they have the 2 and 4, and the other district, other election cycle, you have 1, 3, and 5. That's just, you could change that, but that's generally how it's done. And so usually what we would do is at the end of the process, we would look at the map that you're going to adopt. And we would say, okay, do we want to make any changes to the numbering of these districts? So we keep it that 2 and 4 are going to be in 2026, and 1, 3, and 5 are going to be in 2028. But then we just, if we want to move, somebody says, well, can we make District 1, 2, and 2, 1 so that they align with the way we want these election districts to come up? You can do that. Now, there is in the law a requirement that you give special consideration to any public input with regards to when these districts come up. Now, one area in some district election systems that becomes important is looking at the minority district, the district that has the highest citizen voting age population, in this case of Latinos. You could, as an example, say, hey, we're really concerned that this district, maybe it hasn't elected somebody from that side of the city in the past. I don't know, because I don't know where anybody lives. But you could say it's important for us to have that district come up right away in 2026, because we want to make sure that as soon as possible, we can have an opportunity for that community of interest, that Latino community, to elect a candidate of choice. And so we're going to make that district come up in 2026. Somebody else from the community could come forward and say, hey, we've looked at the data. And in the data, Latino turnout is about 4, 5, 7% higher in presidential elections. So we want from now until forever that the Latino district, or the district that has more apartment renters, the lower turnout voters, that district comes up in the presidential election cycle. So we want it to be in 2028. Those are the kinds of considerations you might hear from the community about that sequencing. So as you think about that, that's what you want to look to in terms of input from the public. Now, we don't have to decide this today. In fact, what might be best is you decide what map you're going to choose first. And once you've adopted that map, then you make a decision on numbering and make that a part of the actual motion that you pass. at your next hearing, or you could do it as a separate motion. But essentially, that process is done once you've selected a map. I just want to introduce a little more discussion about that so you're aware of how that works. So we went through a process of identifying some preferred plans, making changes, making direction on new maps, and we are now at a point where you can discuss these maps. If you say, we've thought about it, we don't like any of these maps, we want to start talking about some of the districtor maps, we can do that. If you want to just say, one of these two maps is our preferred, we're going to go forward, that's fine too, but I'm here to help any way that you need.
Okay, thank you. Do we, questions? Councilmember Hagley.
Real quick on the sequencing, where my head goes is, yeah, the even odd numbers, but also I would want some separation. Like I don't want all south and then all north kind of thing. Like, is that kind of a consideration? And then that's my first question.
Mm-hmm. Generally, it hasn't been so much of a consideration. I know that in the state redistricting, they do odd even going south, literally with, like a ruler going down. And as soon as a district touches, then they go to the next number. So it goes odd, even, odd, even, odd, even, odd, even. You could do it something like that. We could literally just let it fall the way it does and just say, we're going to go 1 through 5, north to south or south to north, and just choose that as the way that you make the decision. Sure, there's nothing against that.
In the other part, there's a rule about you can't draw lines and make decisions based on where council members live. We're a small town. We kind of all know where everybody lives. We know whose districts are up and that sort of, or not districts, but who lives in areas that potentially. So without names, I mean, it's kind of, how do you navigate that from a transparency standpoint? When I know for me personally, I'm looking at, you had mentioned like presidential election years. I don't know if that was an example or that was a fact that like Latino voting turnout is higher. That's something that I hadn't considered, and that's a good thing to kind of mull around and think about. And then I'm also looking at, well, the southern section, like through this whole process of kind of focused on that kind of the southern portion, which I think historically, just like going back, the Parkland Farms northern area really didn't always have representation. And so I was trying to like navigate through that process. What's the,
so
how do you approach that?
Yeah, so ever since the Fair Maps Act has been in place, we as demographers have always encouraged agencies to not consider where incumbents live, and we as a company have made it a policy to never know where incumbents live. The law has gotten strengthened, so the language has been tightened up around drawing districts and not allowing incumbency to be a factor in drawing districts. Once you've adopted a map, the district drawing process is done. Now you're talking about implementation and the numbering process, and I think in that environment, you can say, okay, we're going to open the books a bit. And we've been in council meetings where council members have just said, I'm in this district, I'm in this district, I'm in this district, to allow that transparency so the public knows how the vote is happening. And I don't know, maybe 2 of you are in a district, maybe 3 or 4 of all of you are in a district, I don't know. But when that does happen, you then can make a decision about the numbering and sequencing that can align so that you aren't creating a situation that somebody's seat is up in 2028 and you're just arbitrarily making their seat up in 2026 so that, somebody runs or they have to vacate their seat or run or whatever it is. So I think you kind of think of it as we're going to adopt the maps with the full, commitment to the line drawing process, not considering where incumbents or candidates live. But once the maps have been adopted and you're doing the number sequencing, then you create transparency around that. And that's been pretty common.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Councilmember
You had a
Edwards.
couple of questions that have been sent to me quite often around the California voting right, that you can't establish it about race. Are we doing that? Are we in violation of anything with taking Hispanic in? I don't know if that's a race as far as a group.
So this is something that I discussed even at the last meeting about, considering race in districting is kind of like, I use the analogy of a speedometer. When you're driving, you want to look at the speedometer, but you can't just stare at your speedometer, you're going to hit something. And you can't never look at the speedometer because you're going to speed. And we have these two competing legal principles that we have to deal with that are kind of in conflict with each other. One is the Federal Voting Rights Act and the idea that we want to make sure that we're considering race and in the California Voting Rights Act, we're considering race when it comes to the idea of diluting voting participation or any implementation of a districting system that could have the effect of have a negative effect on a minority population that's a protected class. At the same time, we can't draw districts with race being the predominant factor. So just underline that, the predominant factor. If I went into a districting as an example and somebody said, hey, Paul, bring up the map. Now see all those Latinos? I want you to draw the line tightly around all those Latinos. And I don't care about anything else. Just around that, I would say they're doing that based on race being a predominant factor. And we haven't done that here. We've considered race as we should in the districting process. But like in the conversation we had last week, let's look at Healdsburg Avenue. Do we move the line here or there? What are the communities of interest? What are the trade-offs? What about is it 31% Latino or 29% Latino? Let's be aware of that. We had a really good conversation there that is perfect in balancing the need to be aware of the racial or demographic impacts of the districting process and maintaining the focus on communities of interest. So we've done it right.
Okay, and the other question, this is kind of a strange one. It says that if any district that a current council member represents the Southern District would amount to gerrymandering. In other words, do we have to have an empty district, or we're looking at several factors when we're drawing lines here? And so it can end up, because we're not drawing it based on where people live, it's just what we end up with when we selected the map.
Yeah, I guess I don't understand the question. I don't know.
It's kind of a strange question, but it's one that's been put to me a lot, that saying that, we absolutely have to have a district that has no current council member in it.
I mean, sometimes people look for maps that have, if a map has a vacant empty district, they think, aha, that was a good districting because there was a vacant district, but that doesn't always happen. If a council is just naturally more dispersed than another, then it's more likely they're going to be all in one or more of the districting plans going to be in districts. There's a kind of deeper analysis that has been done in some cases to determine whether or not it is a gerrymandering, considering, how many incumbents are in the district, but I don't think that that's an issue here.
All right, thank you.
So I think when you answered my question, it kind of clarified that there's two things that's going on. Number one is drawing the lines, which is very data-based. And I think what you're talking about with the gerrymandering is if when you're drawing the lines, you're like, all right, let's maneuver it this way and that way. And I think, and we have to do a report at the end of the day on how we came up with the different numbers. And that's where this exercise of, some of the, not districts, the precincts? No, what are
census blocks?
The census blocks. I think we all started playing with that map and going, there's some weird census blocks in there. And I think we did that last time where you add a chunk and suddenly like the population jumps and then it, screws everything up. So I think there's two things, which is getting whatever the districts are and the lines are. And then part two is when we're coming up with, all right, these districts are going to be the ones that are going to be up at this time and these at this time.
Yeah. And let me just reinforce for anybody from the public who's watching this for the first time. We as demographers have no idea where any of the incumbents live. We don't know where any potential candidates live. And we've been drawing these districts based on publicly submitted maps. And these districts to me look compact, they look contiguous, they have respected communities of interest, they follow the natural boundaries. These meet all the Fair Maps Act criteria.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No. So we'll open up the public hearing to public comment then. Anybody who has comments, please come forward.
Good evening, Council.
Welcome.
Richard Berg. I'm just curious, I walked in a few minutes late, and I'm curious, the maps that are currently being reviewed, what the answer was of how many districts include part of the downtown. Because we talked about that a couple of weeks ago or last month, and it was clear that there were maps that had all of the downtown in one district, and some maps actually seemed to be stretched to ensure that every district had a piece of the downtown commercial district. So that's a question, and maybe it was answered in Paul's presentation. And then how many maps are currently being considered by the council is another question. I don't have any other answers. I made some maps, I didn't label them. It seemed to me that it was a very nuanced and not very complicated process unless you care about a particular census block. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Welcome.
Good evening, everybody. Jonathan Perlman. I was pleased to see that there were a number of the maps that did address the issues that we talked about last time in terms of splitting the historic district or the Healdsburg Avenue, somewhere on one side or the other. From the couple that Paul put up here tonight, it seemed like the river was an important one. So the map, I think it was C2, I'm not completely sure, but it picked up the east side of town, and so the two smaller area districts were in the middle. They didn't extend all the way to the east, and it came down and included the south entry portion. And those all picked up the river, which seemed to be one of the things that was important in the future development of what happens on the other side of the river from that district. And then it seems to me that, of course, I live kind of near Badger Park. So the housing that's all up, that goes up Fitch Mountain and goes out to South Fitch Mountain Road seems very similar, as opposed to catching some of the character area 1 just to the east of downtown and then extending it and including things like Fitch Mountain, the base of Fitch Mountain. So that particular map, which I believe was C2, seemed to be the one that kind of picked up most of the comments from last time and addresses some of these issues of communities of interest. So that seemed to be the best one that I could see. So thank you very much. Good luck with this process.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to make comment? If not, we'll bring it back to council and close the public hearing. And comments? Councilmember Edwards?
Yeah, I think that, one of the things that last meeting was very informative. There were a lot of things when I was looking through these that, some of the things were, we had additional maps of it. It seems like we had more 5-district maps submitted again through this process that kind of checked the boxes on that. A lot of the maps covered what we were discussing, like the two sides of Healdsburg Avenue. The trailer parks was one that Councilmember Kelly brought up. And so going through those and kind of evaluating, listening to what all the council members said, checking those things off, it's clear that there were, like map D really hit that area where you have two districts that have some formula retail in it, because that was an issue that we talked about. Most of them had at least 2 of the trailer parks in them. And a lot of them did get part of Healdsburg Avenue, the lower part, the commercial district, and the upper part were in that. And then one of the, and I didn't know if we could take a look at one of the maps that really hit a lot of the things that the public submitted this last round, but it was out due to size. And so I don't know if we could look at that map. That would be 286075.
Do you know where it is in our packet by chance? what page it's on?
No, I don't. I kind of put it into a spreadsheet form so I could easily have a hyperlink to that because the page numbers were kind of strange to see on that sometimes. Thank you. Yeah. It was one of the newer maps, so if you go to the fair map section, it's on page 2 of that, I believe.
I have it on the screen if you want.
And while we're looking for that, I wonder if we could answer Richard's question. The question was how many maps? And I'm not sure what your second question was. Oh, thank you. And the commercial district. So that'll probably come up in the discussion, I'm sure, right?
Just to talk about that
3.
briefly, we don't have like a specific, we never received like a specific map of the exact boundaries, like in a shapefile of the commercial district. So it'd be more by an eyeball test than by actually looking at the data. If we were to obtain a actual like street by street, we could look at the census blocks and give an actual calculation so that at the next hearing, we could have something like that for both of the plans that or any of the plans you're considering. But right now, it'd just kind of be like an eyeball test.
Fair enough.
This is the map you were discussing here, 286075.
Yes.
And what was the question about that?
It's off, just in your evaluation here on the fairness, it said relatively equal in proportion size, and there was an X on that. So I wanted to be a little, I kind of went through and looked at them and took it as the assignment of, does it fit all those criteria? But it was a good public map, and I didn't want to kick it out just because that size was there.
Let me see if I can get the.
I know because we worked on map, the last one of 278352 that Vice Mayor Herod brought up, and we were able to clean that up to 285161 to even that one out.
Sorry, this trackpad is a little touchy.
Mouse, yes.
216, I think it's off on the bottom, Paul.
Oh,
Just gotta
okay.
click the.
Thank you.
One of those times where paper is quicker. I did kill a few trees in this, so.
This is just as tricky. Here we go.
If you go to the public fair max, it's on page 3.
This is my lack of the luck of the Irish on this. It's not giving me, letting me mouse around on this.
I couldn't find the actual how uneven it was. It was submitted.
Councilmember Kelly.
I
Please.
just wanted to make a comment about this map since it was brought up and we're kind of just. So the things I don't think work for me about this map are that there is benefit that the plaza area has 2 districts touching it, which we talked about, not having just one district that kind of encompasses all of downtown. And I think that'll be a common theme that I bring up tonight per the city manager's comments at our prior meeting about that as well, that it would be nice if more than one council district had parts of the downtown. One district that is all of downtown or all of the plaza. So I would say that is a benefit of this map that is being brought up. But where I do see some challenges and some pretty big ones are that this does cut Matheson Street in half. So it is not uniting that historic district where half the north side of Matheson is in one district and the south side of Matheson is in a different district. Also, I think the challenges around Healdsburg Avenue remain problematic for me. So I brought that up, that it doesn't make sense to me that you have people living on the west side of Healdsburg Avenue living in a different district than those on the east side of Healdsburg Avenue. And that is a problem that exists in a large part of this map and some of the others as well. And I think the challenge I see with Healdsburg Avenue really has to do with, I'm pointing this way because it's literally right there, that you have your railroad tracks on the west side of Healdsburg Avenue, and there is a very small sliver of homes like Larkspur and a couple homes next to the fire station that exist between Healdsburg Avenue and the railroad tracks. And a lot of those homes are being put into the district that is on the west side of the tracks, but you cannot access those homes without having to go all the way up to Dry Creek Road or all the way down to Grant Street, because as you know, you can't cross the railroad tracks, which will become that much more clear when the train is coming to town in 3 years. So to me, cutting Healdsburg Avenue in half and having the west side of Healdsburg Avenue in the district with on the other side of the tracks and the east side of Healdsburg Avenue in the, east side of the tracks districts, you're cutting Healdsburg Avenue into two districts and you're putting this sliver of homes into a district that it's actually not contiguous to because you can't access it because of the railroad tracks. I don't know if I'm making that as clear as I could, but I do think having both sides of Healdsburg Avenue, neighbors that live across the street from each other who have shared interests, especially as we're about to endeavor on this huge roadway project on Healdsburg Avenue, for them to be in two separate districts, to me, doesn't make a ton of sense. And the fact that the people on the west side of Healdsburg Avenue are in this district that they technically aren't adjacent to because the tracks bisect it, that to me is kind of tricky on this particular map and some of the other ones as well.
Did you find a map that, because I tried and I could not get all of Healdsburg Avenue into one district on both sides, because we have Powell, for example, that'll be one side. A lot of the maps had Powell Street where one side is in one district, the other side is in the other district. There were a lot of, if we get it down to that, it seems like we're always going to have a street divided. And did you see a map that had Healdsburg Avenue that you liked?
I think that we can, if we decide that it's a priority or a value that we want to prioritize in this process, that we can direct redistricting partners to make a map that does what we need it to do. If a random person in the community didn't create one and submit it, it doesn't mean we can't do that. It means that we can tell the team that we've hired, the professional experts, to draw us the map that does X. If we think the plaza should have 3 districts touching it or 2 districts touching it, we can say, hey, do that. Or here's our zoning map that has the CD and the CS district, and we want to make sure that we've identified what is downtown per our city zoning, and we give him the zoning map. And the fact that we haven't done that yet is a little...
So
we tried last, okay.
I wanted to ask a question about the Healdsburg Avenue piece. Healdsburg Avenue has got a lot of different homes and businesses and so on on it, not necessarily housing on both sides of the street, right? So your comment, it feels like, can we pick and choose what part of Healdsburg Avenue goes where? I mean, I guess that's the question, because like I know the area where I used to live, like Big O Tires and the car wash and card lock and all that's on one side, and on the other side there are some houses. So do they need to be in the same district in that way? So that's kind of the question. Can you divide that up as well? Because that would make more sense to me. Right.
I think for me, I'll just say this and then sorry, didn't mean to cut anybody off, but kind of where the question came up for me was going back to knocking on doors and talking to people. There was one person that lived on Healdsburg Avenue, but on the east side. And we were discussing Measure O in a housing overlay district for the west side. And the comment was, I'm going to be looking at that, which then brought me back to your comment. Whatever development goes on across the street is impacts this person that lives on the east side of Healdsburg Avenue. And that brought me back to your example about the 49er stadium. And, if you live next to the stadium, how does that impact you? That said, you make a really good point about Healdsburg Avenue and the housing on the one side and the higher density on the other, which is completely normal. So these are just some thoughts that go into my head in terms of how to split it. I think what we have in our favor is I mean, this whole thing is going to get redone in 5-6 years anyway, because our populations are going to completely change. So some of these lines will get new, precise, laser focused, exact. In there's going to be a revision to whatever these lines are coming up. So I think like in terms of the discussion, I think there's good points on both sides, but I don't think just because somebody lives across the street, then suddenly they need to be included in this district. To your point, you have these dividing lines with Powell and even with Matheson. It's not a big deal to me whether, half of Matheson is in one district and half in the other, the downtown. I mean, that's not a big thing for me. I was focusing more on the southern portion and how that is split up, because I'm not a fan of from Chiquita all the way down to Healdsburg Lumber. That seems like a very on the map. It looks nice to have that. For me, it seems, I know a lot of the maps we considered had that long strip.
Yeah, I think I was trying to do 8 maps. We narrowed it down to the ones that you presented out, plus the new ones that the residents. I mean, are we going to keep redrawing everything? And at what point do we have to say, okay, I looked at this one and it fit this criteria that we were saying, this one fit the criteria. I mean, we need to narrow it down to at some point. And if you keep trying, I mean, we can keep drawing it, but I mean, we need to have some, I would think that for me, I needed to go look at what was there, what the council said last meeting, and then find maps that fit what the council said. And I might be wrong, as that's what we should have done. But how do we narrow it down if we don't look at it that way? I mean, I thought we needed to come with some evaluation of the maps we looked at based on what we discussed last time.
And Vice Mayor, you had some comments?
I think it's an interesting point, and I think in a really small town, you do get a whole different sort of demographic on one side of the street than the other, and it's worth looking at. However, it's my understanding that at the beginning, one of the key guidelines we had for making a meaningful map was to focus on natural barriers, whether they're main roads or rivers or creeks or train tracks and things of that nature. And so I think it was very natural, given that advice, that we see Healdsburg Avenue becoming a border and Matheson becoming a border and so on. Powell Avenue is another one that comes up a lot. So I never had any problem with that. I understand that it is a little weird, because everything's sort of a, exaggerated microcosm in little tiny Healdsburg, but I don't see that. I think it would be a real struggle to break out of that, frankly. And I don't know that it would really give us super meaningful results. But, so to your point, maybe we want to, it might be something we become really focused on next time we go around with this. But I think a lot of the best maps that have come out have already kind of leaned up against those major thoroughfares and so on. So that's what I'm comfortable with. What I'm really focused on, and what I thought was really, I think it helped us focus as a council last time, was a couple main points, and I don't mind adding to this list, but what I thought it was important that we identified these 3 things. One, that we have a district that has a strong Latino majority in it. 2, that we have some splitting up of the downtown that makes sense. And 3, that we had some meaningful representation of the southern part of the town. And we're not going to get a perfect combination of those 3 things. And there may be a 4th or 5th that you want to throw on that list, if that list makes any sense to you. But I'm speaking to everybody. But I thought that looking at those 3 kind of goals for an outcome, I thought was really productive.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Sorry, Councilmember Kelly.
I appreciate that, Vice Mayor, and I think that I agree with those priorities. I will just mention, in our last meeting, we looked at a couple of the arterial streets that cut, to me, communities that make sense to keep together, such as map C2, draft C2, the top of March Avenue, Highland Circle, those homes are not contiguous with how you get there. So they are on an island of a district that you can't reach. So to me, that was problematic for draft C2. In addition, the Fitch Mountain Villas HOA community is cut in half. So March Avenue is a delineating line on map C2, which means if you live north of March Avenue in the Fitch Mountain Villas, you're in one district. And if you live on the south side, you're in a different district. To me, because that community is a very distinct residential community, same HOA, same amenities, same house design, it seems odd to cut it in half, or sorry, to cut the neighborhood in half based on those two districts. And in draft C2, the plaza is only in one district. And to me, that goes against kind of what we were talking about with trying to have more than one representative district touch the plaza. So to me, for those reasons, I don't think I could go with map C2. And those were priorities that I think, not that the Fitch Mountain Villas neighborhood is the only neighborhood we should be considering. However, if we cut Parkland Farms in half, you better believe we'd be hearing about it, because that makes no sense, because it was developed in a way where a lot of those residents have similar interests because of the way that the city was developed. So I think I agree about unifying certain neighborhoods that have sense and character. I agree with Councilmember Higley's point around having that district in one of the maps that stretches from Chiquita Grove on the north end of the community center all the way down to the south entry point feels like a very long and not compact district. I understand why it's drawn that way, but I think we can come up with a better way to engage that section without it literally being nearly the entire stretch north to south.
I'll real quick just jump in. Yeah, I would be happy to remove C2 from consideration.
Yes.
Both 2 and 4 seem very big. Yeah, so I would be happy to reduce so that we're making progress.
That's why we came up with map D, I think, last time, is that was one that we drew here and got into the maps where, yeah, C2 doesn't fit it, but I was just kind of going through it. But D, for me, hits what we were talking about. We actually, with Mr. Mitchell, we drew that one here last meeting with all of our input at that time. So that's where I'm trying to get to.
Vice Mayor.
Total agree on that one. This is the map that I keep coming back to. And it's collaborative in terms of all these priorities. And so I'd like to spend, if everyone agrees, some time maybe just fine tuning this. If we want to look at something else to A/B it, that's cool. But this one for me is a front runner.
I agree with that. This map seems to hit a lot of the issues that we've just been talking about, and we're all agreeing on. And we did adjust it for the south entry, so we made some adjustments there so that was not that full length. And just looking at it, it actually almost looks, symmetrical, if you will, but it takes care of the Fitch Mountain Villas problem that you're talking about, right? It brings all that in there, and it cuts it it's at March Avenue to Powell, which then Powell to, the logic of it seems very, very clear to me.
It has the compactness, more than almost any other map.
So the one of the 5 districts that kind of I liked was draft A.
One thing about draft A, 3 districts that touch the plaza, I thought that was beneficial.
I just liked how District 5 covered the future development area, which, I mean, very, very future, like in the distant future. But I feel like that, I like the idea of it going, I think it goes right to the roundabout, right? And then goes south. Or no, it covers a little bit north of the roundabout. So I like how that kind of covers a very diverse set of the southern part of town. I liked how 2 came up and came across into by Big John's over there. I'm on map A. draft A. It's that one right there. And I completely agree with Fitch Mountain Villas, and this captures it.
Where is that cutover? That doesn't make sense to me. So are we cutting March Avenue in half here,
No, it's both sides.
except at the top?
Yeah, the blue part's the hospital, right? The hospital commercial buildings right there.
That's the hospital
Yeah.
right there.
But so
So it captures both sides of Kingsburg Gap. I mean,
yeah,
sorry,
no,
March Avenue.
March Avenue. Yeah, I don't. Yes, please, Vice Mayor.
This was the front run, or not the front runner, the second runner up for me. And but the concern I have, because I mean I think it does meet most of the priorities, like was mentioned. But it the way it reaches out over March Avenue there is a little contrived and a little worrisome to me. I guess if the consultants aren't worried about that, then I shouldn't be either. But the map D doesn't do that. It's like I said, it's just the blocks are a little clearer, a little more arbitrary, maybe in a good way. And but it does check all the boxes, this map. So we do get a lot of sharing in the downtown, strong South, strong Latino population in one of the districts. So that's all a go.
This does have the highest citizen voting age population Latino in that Western district because it comes, this portion that comes in order to make equal population also brings in that more renter community a little bit north of the high school there. And in doing so, increases the Latino CVAP of this district.
Yeah, please.
For map A compared to map D, can you show us the demographics around the renter population in those breakdowns? Do we have that?
I can prepare it for you.
Yeah,
I don't think we have it at our finger. I don't think
Okay.
is that averaged, census block groups. So it might not be as contrasting, but yeah, we would have that.
The other thing about map A that I think, I was just looking at the newly published high fire severity maps that were all recently updated. And I think what's interesting about, if you looked at this map and you didn't know that Fitch Mountain existed, right? If you were just like, everything's flat and we're all just the same geographically, a lot of these maps make sense. You just cut it up with lines and squares. But if you think about it in the context of the fire severity and that being such an issue that keeps people up at night, and access to some of those higher elevations along Fitch Mountain and along the ridgeline on the east side of the city, I think that there are, draft A does, continue to that big, and on my map, it's District 4. On here, it's the green one. That's a huge part of the high fire severity zone that's kept together. And then also the folks along the river, including the senior communities, Rivers Bend, et cetera, are all together with the rest of the river zone, which I don't think is the same in some of the other maps. So I think there's some great things about this map, and I think it's kind of interesting when I like the idea that it includes March Avenue, because I think when you look at that March Avenue arm, it has a lot more in common statistically, demographically, and income-wise with the area on the west side of the tracks, of the railroad tracks, than it does with some of the neighboring communities, whether it's to the south. I think, there's definitely a lot of homeowners in that neighborhood to the north of it. So knowing that it's a high renter district, I think it's okay to include that arm of March Avenue. And so I like this map as well.
Councilmember Higley.
The one thing I wanted to add on this, what is that? Purple, pink, what's the official color?
I don't know.
Fuchsia, whatever the south. I've been focused on the south area, and partly because we had the SMART train coming, and some of the maps would kind of cut the line based on where the tracks were. And I feel it's important that we kind of capture that entire area that really is going to be impacted by the SMART train and the additional, we're going to be looking at improvements in that area and different things going on. So that's where I do like that it kind of goes out a little bit further than some of the other maps that we looked at. And I agree with Councilmember Kelly on that little piece that comes in for the yellow section, over March, which, we've all walked and knocked in that area, and I think it does fit.
Yeah, I live sort of in that area. That part just seems odd to me. All of March Avenue from Healdsburg Avenue are similar kinds of homes. So we're cutting it at University, I guess. So is that all the Fitch Mountain Villas? Is that where that cutoff is happening? Yeah, they're right there. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm looking at this map, and as you say, it's not flat, and I really think that area at Riverview going up to Fitch Mountain there really, to me, fits better in with the Riverview area in District 4 on this one. That is my real concern on that, and actually physically looking and thinking about that area, that far east section really fits in with the Riverview, but that's just my view of it.
Are you talking about the yellow section?
No, I'm talking about
the fuchsia.
Oh, yeah, I'm looking. It's different. If you go on the redistricting,
It's a different color.
Different color.
Yeah.
So,
I think the public's looking at this one. So.
Yeah.
so the fuchsia and that little far east part of the green, that right in there. Yeah. I think that really fits better with the Riverview area than being apart, because you have to go all the way around to get to that other side of that. You can't get from that little carve out directly to there.
So it seems like we've got kind of focusing on 2, A and D at this point. And maybe if we identified what we really want to see in A and D, that we could talk about moving them forward and having the demographers work on making them achieve that.
We might want to do it here so that we can have them available at the next hearing. So that we're not walking in the next hearing.
Okay, got it. But so moving 2 ahead and making a final decision next time would be acceptable?
Yeah, and if you wanted to make sure any changes that you want to see at the next hearing are kind of discussed now.
Okay.
Yeah, and then if you have a binary decision next hearing, A or D, then at least it's clear for the public what it is you're considering.
Okay. Yes, please, go ahead.
Councilmember Edwards, I wanted to just follow up on what you're saying, because I didn't understand what you're saying. Are you comparing map A and D and talking about the difference in that easternmost section of what's north of South Fitch Mountain Road, but on the bottom right corner of this map?
Yeah.
Okay, so on one of the maps, that section, I think it's was that McDonough Heights and
Yes.
Hidden?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so on one of the maps, McDonough Heights and Hidden Acres is connected to the area south of South Fitch Mountain Road where the Rivers Bend community is, and that is map, what letter am I looking at? Oh,
D.
D. And then you're saying on the other one, it's attached here, so it's, and which one do you prefer? You want McDonough Heights to connect to the Rivers Bend?
Mm-hmm. Because I think if I remember the fire map, Riverview is still in that whole area is still in that fire area of concern.
It is, yeah.
I don't know if that's that big of a deal to me to draw the district lines, because if you're in the fire zone, you're in the fire zone.
Yeah, I didn't
kind of moved a little bit because of the fire zone.
I was just answering Councilmember Kelly concern
okay.
about that. But to me, when you're out there, you're not going to be from McDonough Heights and going it's not an easy trek from that McDonough Height over to the other side of Fitch Mountain.
Is this one of the areas in which it could go either way because it's not a census tract that can't be, it seems as though it's something that we could choose to undo or do. Is that right, given the fact that in one map it's in one district and the other map it's in another district?
So are you talking about moving
Yes.
the purple into this fuchsia here?
I'm curious, how many homes is it, or what's the population?
Starts at 2303, goes to 2259. So that's within Still okay in deviation.
Yeah, I think, you know, to me, it makes sense to keep it in it is north of South Fitch Mountain Road and it's on the hillside. It's a pretty steep hillside and a lot of that area has kind of similar hillside issues. So I'm okay with it being in, you know, adjacent to the Hidden Acres and that yellow map as opposed to it being on the flat, more, you know, Riverside. But to me, it's not like a deal breaker either way.
And you know, when I'm looking at it, map D just doesn't have a lot of these blocks that are cut in and put around. It's to me, it looks more compact. It looks clearer than these little indents that we have on A.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I kind of brought it up earlier. I mean, I would like to get your feedback about those little anomalies. That section of the Western District that jets out along March Avenue in the center of town, and to a much lesser degree at the bottom, south of North Street. There's that, in the map we're looking at, that, yeah, right there. Is that standard? Is it allowed for the shape of those districts to be that way?
I just wanted to reopen it so that
yeah,
because I accidentally clicked a color on it. So first off, this one right here, I think, is without question helping achieve something with regard to the higher citizen voting age population and capturing. Remember those heat maps at the last hearing? If anybody's watching, they can go to the last PowerPoint presentation we did. And there was a heat map that showed a denser Latino population here, and then the other dense Latino populations in the rest of the Western District. So that would be something that I think would be considered normal to have that cut out. This cutout here, we could look at the population if it could fit into, it probably couldn't fit into the turquoise district because it's already overpopulated. But if we wanted to move it, that's fine. It might just be there because of population equality and something that we can't really address. So population equality is the top criteria, and the bottom criteria is actually the compactness. So it isn't the most important criteria. When we talk about this, it's probably best to talk about it in terms of keeping communities together rather than, you know, the potential that it, you know, 3 districts touching the plaza might not be consistent with like the idea. But if we have districts coming together in an area like this and we have to meet population equality and we're trying to balance these other criteria, it's perfectly okay.
Okay. So here we are. You know, I still have a problem with that even though you're talking about the demographics for the Hispanic population in the strip and then cutting into March Avenue. The neighborhoods are very, very different, right? That neighborhood it's kind of its own neighborhood too. So, and I don't imagine that people sort of associate themselves with the strip along Grove Street there. So it seems like that should be part of the consideration.
Absolutely, trade-offs. These are trade-offs.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's a community kind of in that area all by itself, to be honest.
Remember this population up here. So it's kind of like a game. It's like a New York Times Wordle kind of game or something like that. Is this area down here, or it's more like an SAT question, is this area down here more like the western side of the city than this area here is like the western side of the city? In terms of raw demographics from somebody just looking at the numbers, this would look more like the western side of the city. But if you as council members, people know the community, listening to public input, feel that this portion going down to presidential circles more like this western side of the city, then that's where it should go. And again, it's trade-offs.
Yeah. To me, that is I mean, that's where I think the map D encompasses that for me in a more reasonable way, that they are more logical to go together in that fashion. But
I agree.
Anybody else have any questions, comments?
I'll just say with map D, I'm just kind of looking at pros and cons of both A and D. I think looking at downtown on map, I want to make sure I'm saying the right letter here. I think it's D. looking at downtown and how, much of it is encompassed, the area around the plaza specifically. I do think there's a good amount of kind of splitting up of some of the commercial district between districts 1 and 2. Are my numbers even right? Looking at what your numbers say and
I'll
what
turn
my
those off.
packet said.
It might just be
Sorry.
so that they were drawn in.
And actually, I'm looking at a different map than that.
You can change to that one.
I'm looking at D. At least the packet says it's D, draft D.
Yeah,
You're able to toggle between A and
But
D app.
that is not what this is not what I'm looking at. So that's my problem. I'm looking at packet page 244 of the PDF.
You just go to that.
Yeah, it's no ID number.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get this mouse to work for me again.
I guess maybe it'd be a good question to ask if what the back to having the downtown commercial district in straddle more than one district, or are we okay with one council district kind of encompassing most of downtown and the plaza? Is that a priority or not? And maybe city manager, you want to mention what you told us last time about this, just to remind us.
What did we say before? Yeah.
Sure, I don't know, as you just heard, it's just more trade-offs. But what I recall saying is something to consider, and something that I've seen in another city is when one district encompasses sort of the entirety of downtown, and there are different definitions of downtown too. It creates over time the mindset that one council member speaks for and is responsible for the downtown area. That can be neat and clean sometimes, but I also know that we all treasure the downtown, and a little bit more of a shared responsibility for it can have some value. So I think that was really the gist of it. There may be opportunities to serve on business improvement districts or chamber of commerce activities. And it may be preferable to not always have one council member who is that part of the community. So I think that was really the sentiment. I don't think you're going to get, not that anybody has suggested it, 5 districts touching a little bit of downtown. So to me, it's just something to think about. Is it entirely with?
On map D, can we look at that? What are we looking at as far as the downtown? I have a hard time visual. I've never been a map reader, so I'm at a disadvantage, but what districts are?
They intersected Piper and Healdsburg Avenue, whereas on A, they intersected near the plaza.
So there's 2 districts, there's 2 or 3 then, right?
There's 3 on each of them.
Yeah, map A has 3 council member districts that all kind of touch downtown, and map D has 2, but the majority of the plaza is in one district. And then there's a quadrant where Black Oak Coffee is, that block that's in District 2.
I'm just going to bring up D and A both in here. So this is the downtown area in D.
And it's right where the word Healdsburg is written, if that's helpful at all.
And then this is that same area in A.
Yeah, from my perspective, I'm not sure it's like the critical thing for me to have 3 districts touching the downtown. We still have 5 council members who, if things were going to happen, you'd have to have at least 3 votes anyway. But, and I just think that map D just represents better for me, but because of that March Avenue cut in, that I don't like that. Anybody else have any comments on that? Yes.
again, if we're talking about map A versus map D, the pros and, Councilmember Higley, the pros and cons of the smart station area that you were talking about?
Well, I just felt like the impacts, when you're talking about where the major impacts are going to be, is, a lot of these tended to draw a line along Skinny Strip from the north to the south, whether it's the tracks or Healdsburg Avenue. But I think if you put a pin on the smart station and you kind of go out, what impacts that? And I think that's where map A, I think, has what page is map A? I wish these were easier to click through on our end too. Yeah. So I think that's A right there.
Yeah.
So I like how that encompasses all of that. Can you zoom in so we can talk about the downtown at the same time?
Like the purple area?
Yeah. I thought it was fuchsia.
Sorry. The fuchsia area.
Yeah. So what I like about that one is it encompasses that entire area, not just the business area we're going to see some changes, but some of the older neighborhoods that are impacted by the smart train coming. And granted, some of those homes were probably there when the train was rolling into town. Yeah. So it just, to me, when I look at the south area, I think that area, south of the bridge, those are areas that are going to be part of the conversation. And I feel like it kind of ties all those neighborhoods together. The downtown, I mean, I don't have an issue with, part of Matheson being in one district and in another and back and forth. I think I prefer map A. I don't have an issue with the March Avenue area. I mean, it looks a little quirky, but not any more quirky than something like that.
Well, that looks quirky too.
Yeah.
And what is, so breaking up Matheson like that, that's sort of, we've talked about that historic community of interest kind of a thing too, right? It feels a little odd as well to do that.
I'm just saying it doesn't bother me.
Okay. But it's similar to, in my mind, to the March Avenue. It's like, what's your where's your neighborhood? Chris?
Yeah, I am. I think I'm starting to, because it's not as compact as map D, it's sort of offending some OCD side of myself, because map D is very clean. I mean, the compactness is there, and I think there's some logic. I'm not really sure how to put my finger on it about those middle districts moving from east to west the way they do. Whereas in map A, 4 and 5 both seem to be kind of sprawling. But this map A does check the boxes more cleanly than map D when I look at it. So I kind of have to relax some aesthetic concerns here and see that this one, I think, does split up the downtown. I think city manager's point was well taken. If our partners are comfortable with the way that that Western District moves along March Avenue, then I am too. It does help, create some cohesiveness there in terms of that demographic. So I'm leaning towards that one now.
I concur.
Okay, that's 3 people who like map A and 2 who like map D. So we can do the count there. Does that mean we want to move map A forward by itself?
Well,
Is that
I
what
think
you're
we should move
suggesting?
it forward. But I am for moving that forward.
There was one modification that was discussed, which is this fuchsia here. So we'll modify it based on this one adjustment
Yeah.
here.
I think so. We agree on that? Okay.
I'm going to save this in.
Call it map.
Are you able to
A2.
zoom in? Western boundary of it is with if you keep going in.
What that street is?
We have a,
McDonough
that's
Hughes,
McDonough.
McDonough Heights. It looks like there's one little.
and Does anyone know, I don't recall, you get to Hassett from Hidden Acres or from McDonough? Like, are we cutting off, like, we're pulling that section part of it into the flats area, but are we creating a section where Hassett is up there that it's really, that all should stay together? Do you get to Hassett from McDonough or you get it from Hidden Acres? Okay. Hidden Acres is what everybody in the room is saying. Okay.
Yeah.
No? McDonough. Chief and Chief are saying you get there from McDonough to Hassett.
So this portion, this Hassett Lane portion and Alta Vista Drive, this area here. Yeah, so these would be not contiguous by travel contiguous to the rest of the Green District, but they can still be considered a community of interest. It's not the most important issue there. Really, I think the question is, do you want this larger area here in the Fuchsia District or not? It looks like the entirety of this road would be actually this road would be split. So one side of the road in Hassett Lane would be in the green, one side of the road would be in the Fuchsia.
Yeah, I think to me, the original drafting of this map that keeps McDonough with Hassett and Hidden Acres, given the slope side of it compared to the flats where the Senior Rivers Bend is, I think that to me makes more sense from a access and community of interest perspective.
So that would just be A. Because with it changed into it, we named that A2 in Districtor.
And can I ask a question? In the jet up for the Fuchsia area on where it cuts Matheson, why is that way? Is that because of the downtown area that we want to hit, or how come we've got that going there?
I would guess that originally that was done because of population. What's going on here with the population? That wasn't in there before. Let me change that. This was just a errant mouse, I think.
Because it's big, 27.
I'm just going to check the one that's in the packet first. Yeah, only one of those census blocks was in there. So this is going to go in back into here like that.
That's nice.
Okay.
Something still.
It still cuts Matheson though, right?
No, we're going to have to go back and look at A real quick. Let me just start back again. Oh, it was. Lime green had that. Okay, let me go back to.
Mm-hmm.
This is A. Right there. Remember, it had this lime green coming into here.
Okay, so is this the one we want to move forward?
That is still A. We would just
This is A.
re-elevate.
Okay. And is that where the 3 council members want to move this one up? And I think Councilmember Edwards, you're good with that too now? Okay. I'll be the lone vote. Yeah, D is my preference, but So, Councilmember Hagley, you said you had a couple other questions.
Yeah, I want to take a look at a couple other maps just in the context. So I want to look at one that has 6 districts, and I want to look at a couple that have 4 that we can talk about. So the one on ID map 1, that was a new one that got submitted, and it's kind of similar to what we just did with map A. And I just want to have a little discussion on that. And it's on packet page 188, and it's ID number 284689, map 1. And this one had a 3.9% deviation.
Mm-hmm.
But just, we haven't really had a deep discussion on some of the, like the larger or smaller districts. And I don't want to talk about mayor, elected mayor versus what, I just want to specifically, well, because I want to talk about the sizes of these districts and then also the lines, because this has something similar to what we just talked about with map A. If you look at District 6, which is the bottom, so on there it doesn't have that, so it looks like it's pretty similar. And then again, District 1 kind of goes over and captures the area that we're talking about. And then what this doesn't do is the that section where Fitch Mountain Villas kind of has that little.
Highland disconnected.
Yeah. But just in terms of, kind of wanted to get your take on, the average, so the population on this goes from, what do we have, 2,300, I think, about on the other, when we had 5 districts. This is down to 18 and 1,900. Do you have any thoughts on like sizes of the districts?
I think as we first discussed this a while ago, the biggest issue with the 6 is that and then 6 districts elected in 6 council members elected in districts. In making smaller districts geographically, sometimes you can capture those areas that have, say, the higher Latino population, and it can feel as though you're strengthening, because in this map, obviously, this blue map is 33.6% Latino CVAP in this Western district, which is pretty high. And smaller districts can sometimes feel like they're coalesce around smaller communities. But really the biggest issue is whether or not you go to a district, a directly elected mayor or not. Yeah, I think that's the most important aspect of it.
Okay. Okay, and then the other ones that I wanted to kind of take a look at, this now goes the other way to 4 districts. And it was on packet page 259, which is ID 278633. Oh, shoot, I just screwed this up. Packet page 259.
278663.
Hang on. Two
2633.
Did you get to it already? 259.
Yeah, that's right there.
I'm having to look on the small ones because it's 259. All right. So this is
what's the number?
The one that's 4 districts. So it didn't have the relatively equal in population size, but again,
close.
What kind of drew my attention was that I can't even see it, was at the bottom, the blue in there. And like I said, I've been kind of drawn to focus on the south side. And again, this now you've got big chunks, and compare that to DP4, which is on, I believe, or DP4, on packet page 262, and that's 277561. And then Terra 4 districts, which is 277527. They're next to each other on the packet page. So just, yeah. And so I was looking at these, and I looked at them last time, and I was intrigued, especially with the southern part. And you can see on DP4, they took that whole southern area and took the kind of the golf course side and kind of all combined it all together into one district. And then you're looking at Terra 4 districts, kind of similar to map A that we just came up with. And I struggled with, obviously, whatever that orange district, or in this, the blue district, the light blue that goes from Parkland Farms all the way down almost to the roundabout. But I thought it was, so what kind of, as we're going through this process, where I kept focusing was that, and it kept taking me away from these long, skinny district for the western side. If we're just drawing without taking anything, it seems to make sense to do a long, skinny western side, and then however many districts, just boom, boom, just stack them up on the right hand side. but I wanted to at least elevate and discuss these to kind of, mention that some of the elements that we're talking about now have been captured in some of these previous ones that were submitted, that really kind of help, in terms of my thought process on how these lines should be drawn.
The first thing that jumps out when you go to fewer districts, it's a lot easier to make districts that are visually seemingly making sense. Like a 4-district scenario, you're going to have a lot fewer hooks in here and there. At the same time, where I said with 6 districts, you can kind of encapsulate that minority population better. And so you can have pretty easily a 33-36% Latino district. Both of these plans that I brought up are at most 27-28% Latino, and they're most Latino districts. Because now you have a district where it is maybe the most cohesive Latino population, but you're having to go even further north to get full population equality. So having fewer districts sometimes can add to dilution of the voting power of a community of interest. And in the other end of the spectrum, having more districts means, like I said earlier, you can more tightly draw a district around that community to give it a better opportunity to elect a candidate of choice. And again, with this, as in with the 6, you're also discussing the directly elected mayor.
Yeah. Yeah. And part of the reason I brought this up was I wanted to look and discuss these different, the maps in terms of the sizes and what impacts that has. And you kind of highlighted some of the concerns, and also the advantages, I guess, when you're not talking about these little nooks and crannies sometimes. But yeah, that one, I didn't like that top district, but I was intrigued about how this one took all of that golf course hillside area and brought it down, encompassing what could happen with the smart station. Sorry, the darker blue.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the south end of town. But also, I don't know how much on the very north end of that dark blue really is tied to the southern end of, say, like Kennedy Lane. And
in the discussions, we have this area like from Chiquita south along the western side that's been talked a lot about as a community of interest.
Mm-hmm.
And the question of, is this area more like the area going down to Presidential Circle, or is it more like the area going to March Lane? I haven't heard anybody say it's more like the area going north. And having gone up there, it's not. I mean, these are estates up there.
He knows, he has one.
I don't want to know. I don't want to know. I don't want to know.
They built 300 that look just like it.
Yeah. I appreciate looking at these alternatives, and I think probably all of us spent some time grappling with some of these issues, and it's good to revisit them. So thank you for that. I still come up dissatisfied, and I think there's a lot of lack of just focusing on the map and not the mayor question here. That the cohesiveness of neighborhoods, which is a really difficult thing to grasp at anyway, really slips away with us when we have fewer districts in our particular community.
Anybody else comments? Councilmember Kelly.
I think, it's interesting, the long sliver of the west side of the railroad tracks, continuing to kind of come up as the one outlier shape in a lot of these maps. And it doesn't make sense when you look at it on paper, but it makes sense based on path of travel. As someone who lives on the west side of the tracks, my path of travel, it's funny, I remember having a conversation with City Manager Kay, and he's like, I just see Councilmember Mitchell out running all the time, and she's, active in the neighborhood. I'm like, I never see her because we live on different sides of the tracks. And, it's just funny because when you have that path of travel, and it's so hard there's only 2 main arterials, Dry Creek Road and Grant, where you can get across the tracks. And that's now when you can actually walk across the tracks. Imagine what's going to happen when there aren't holes in the fence, when the train's coming through town. the path of travel really is that sliver. I spend all of my time path of travel, north, south. Even when I'm going to Parkland Farms, I stay on Grove Street. I don't cross over to Hillsburg Avenue because it's just more convenient to stay within that sliver. I'm not saying we should combine Parkland Farms and Grove Street into one district, but it is very much the way that our city has been designed. And frankly, the demographics, the census data, the heavily leaning Latino demographic, lower income, higher renter, vast majority of our affordable housing historically has been built in that section. And so it is really just how the way that sliver exists in the community. And I think the question is do we include Kennedy Lane and Presidential Circle in it, or where does that live? What is it more like if you have to, if population requires us to pull some section outside of the main part of the sliver, if it's either this map, which to me is a no-go, pulling in Parkland Farms into the district, pulling in March Avenue, the renter section before you get to Fitch Mountain Villas, or pulling in some of the southern section of town that gets closer to Presidential Circle or closer to Ward Street and some of that, the area around the future Smart Station depot. If you have to pull one in based on trying to grow the population to create population equity in the district, I think that the area, I mean, to your point about the southern section and where do we pull Presidential Circle in, Ward Street, some of that area, I think keeping the depot area intact makes more sense because of the future development that's going to happen there. And when you think about the priority development area that we submitted to MTC for grant funding and kind of the circle around the Smart Station area, that to me is an area that should be, together, because it's going to have a lot of future impacts and, things happening around it that will make it really feel like a community of interest around the depot site. So to me, looking at the Latino demographic data and renters, which hopefully we'll get to see the renter data, I think the March Avenue section is the sliver, if you had to pick one, that makes the most sense to pull into that western section, because it is a path of travel that is contiguous, and it is, demographically speaking, going to shore up a bigger Latino demographic in that district, which is clearly already heavily leaning Latino as the majority Latino district already. So I think if you have to pick one, none of them make a ton of sense, but I think the March Avenue sliver to keep the depot vicinity all in a southern section, to me, is where I'd probably want to see that western district pick up the population and not pick up Parkland Farms or Chiquita.
You're talking about map A then. That's what you're describing, right?
Or if there's another segment of town that we, if, to Mayor Mitchell's point, if we don't want to pull March Avenue into that western district, we have to find population somewhere. So is it the depot? Is it Parkland Farms? Or is it, there's not a lot of other places that make sense. Now that said, I did suggest that we take Larkspur and some of those housing units that have been brought into the Western District and putting them into the Eastern District, because they are on the east side of the track. So we haven't touched that, but if we did, then we'd have to find more population to make up for it. And that might put us going in the wrong direction. But did just want to mention that there, the area around the fire station is what I'm talking about.
It keeps coming up, and I was reminded that we do have the renter, which is the inverse of the homeowner population map here. And you can see this area along March Avenue, and then you can see this sliver, all of which are kind of the more renter heavily portions than the northern part or the eastern part, central part of the city.
I think going back when we were, we heard the original presentation, that I thought we were advised kind of not to look at future development because you don't know if housing density will become, I think it was in Davis or you gave us an area where they were thinking of developing and it turned out that population grew in a different area.
I think that there are differences. If there's an area that's going to be developed and the area, the residents that currently, have a potential negative externality associated with the development, or they're concerned about what is being developed there or how it's being developed or whatever, then that would make a community of interest argument. But what you can't do is say, we're going to underpopulate this district by 20% because we know that there's a new development going in there in the future. That's the distinction.
Well, and I think going back to the original question where drawing the lines and then picking which district order, I think the drawing the lines really, because of the data requirements that we have to hit, kind of ties our hands a bit, which is good on this in terms of making sure we hit these different markers. And so, but when I'm looking at these, I do think not future development like, okay, this is going to happen, because there's a lot that has to happen in terms of discussions about, direction of what it is. But when you look at undeveloped areas and areas that we've discussed in the past, then to your point, I think it's important to think, okay, who do we want to make sure is in the room? I mean, personally, as I'm looking at these different, as we're starting to kind of narrow in on lines, I see these different neighborhoods that, like that little cutout on March Avenue. And I mean, that's a fun neighborhood to knock on. You start to get excited however this gets drawn up, because you know the different characteristics of all the different sections of town that, to me is like, okay, that's going to be exciting. But then the second step is, starting up the community conversations again that are specific in the districts. And, there's a lot of exciting stuff that'll happen once we're done with this phase. So I won't say any more.
So are we back to map A in this conversation? It seems like we've got it up on the screen.
Right up on the screen instead of the 4 district scenarios.
Yeah, so we had talked about 4 and 6, you had talked about 4 and 6 districts.
Yeah.
Without wanting to talk about.
Well, because I specifically wanted to talk about the sizes and just especially map 1, that 6th district one, I thought was interesting because it did start to, it started to kind of form the same key things that I was looking at. It went over onto March Avenue. It captured the southern portion around the SMART train tracks and then along Rivers Bend. So I thought it's not that one. It's the 284689.
I'll bring it up.
Which I thought was, kind of for those 2 elements that really I was focused on, that's one that kind of popped up for me.
So doesn't, those are important points that it seems like we've addressed in the draft A map too already as well, right? Okay. Because for me, I just have to say, unless someone gives me a good reason for switching my thoughts about an elected mayor versus rotating, those maps don't make sense to me to even talk about, other than what you just said, that they encapsulate some of the areas you want. So if we can do that in a 5 district, which I think we've done with map A, that'd be kind of where I would like to see us focus our attention on. Do you agree? Okay. Ariel? Okay. So to try to put a bow on this somewhere along the line, we're 4-1 on map A to move it forward. I think as is at this point, although you're tinkering with it. So, and do we have any others that we want to talk about moving forward?
Still like D to move D forward.
I do too, but we've only got 2 of us on that one. Unless we can convince Chris. No.
Oh, okay.
So.
Can we just
What is about D that A isn't serving? What is it about D that you feel like we are priorities that aren't encompassed in A?
So for me, section 3 and 4 just seem the neighborhoods that they're encapsulating. Like, so on map D, we have Powell Avenue. So we do the cut March to Powell, and that makes sense to me with all of those neighborhoods. They're similar neighborhoods. They're similar. well, neighborhoods, and then Powell Avenue down. So it just seems like to me, it's encapsulating more of the like neighborhoods, more of the communities of interest potential versus chopping them up on the map A. It seems more cohesive. And I really, yeah, the idea of that little carve out of March Avenue, it doesn't make sense to me. I don't like it.
Can you show us the sorry, Mayor Mitchell, can I ask a question?
Yes, please go ahead. This is fine.
Can you show us the Latino voting age population demographic change for between A and D for that District 1 based on when you have in map A it coming in the southern section versus map D pulling in that March Avenue section?
So draft map A, the Latino CVAP here in District 2 is what it's numbered here, is at 36% Latino CVAP. That's in A, and that's because of that.
And that's the March Avenue, right?
Portion that's increasing it. Draft map D is 29.6.
What was map A again? Sorry.
36.
36.
Yeah. Significant
But
to me.
20% more.
yeah, so more, I guess that's the whole point of what we're doing here, and yet we're not supposed to focus on that.
Not the whole point of what we're doing. And it can be a consideration. It just can't be the predominant criteria. You can't say, as a council, we're not going to vote for anything that's under X percent. 37% is our magical number, and we're not going to even look.
Okay.
Say that on balance, trade-offs, this versus that, and that this is one of the criteria. Kind of a thing on the scale, not the only thing on the scale.
Understood. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I just, I think visually there does seems to be some kind of logic to map D, but I want just to reiterate my thoughts here. That Western District, even though it's got sort of a somewhat contrived inclusion of that March Avenue area, it becomes less of a long sliver, and you get a much more robust Southern District, which I think is an important outcome because of it. And we're also looking at splitting up the downtown more cleanly and closer to a three-way split. So I think your points are worthy, but that's where I'm at with that.
Thank you. So map A, I think we've all agreed to that. Well, except me, but I'll go along with it because that's the way you work. So what else? Yes.
With regard to map A, if we're kind of honing in on that, is it possible for you to pull it up in the districtor? Sorry. Escaping me today. There is a section in the March Avenue jut out. So that the top part of the turquoise section that looks like a semicircle.
Yeah.
That is where Alexandria Court and Monte Vista are there. And I'm wondering how bad it impacts our population to include those two semicircles into the turquoise section.
Okay, so first let's set the stage here. The yellow district is underpopulated by 4.36, and the turquoise district is overpopulated by 3.74. So what we'll be doing is we'll making the most underpopulated district even more underpopulated, the most overpopulated district even more overpopulated. And I'm going to do this and just show that I would guess. Yeah, so now the district is 6.47 overpopulated. This district is -7% underpopulated. So you're now at almost a 14% total plan deviation.
Understood. And I plan to make it better in a minute. But my question for my colleagues is, so this particular neighborhood and section to me definitely could lend itself just in thinking about how that neighborhood is made up, the types of homes, the proximity to the high school, et cetera, that to me, to be in turquoise. We don't have numbers here. So if you're willing to think about that, and then picking up population in another place for yellow to try to fix it.
I'm not following. I'm sorry. What
So
are we
just
moving?
click and unclick those two. So in the original map of map A,
Looks like
Monta
that.
Vista, which goes along it's the top curve of my circle. Sorry, the top curve is Monta Vista Avenue and the bottom of it is Alexandria Court. Right now, in the map that's being proposed, those neighborhood blocks are in the yellow. And so I'm suggesting that we take those two blocks and put them in with turquoise because they are more like the neighborhood next and around the high school and less like March Avenue with respect to the homes and how it's laid out in the neighborhood.
And
Population problem.
and what
Have
was
a
your next
population
step?
problem, which because it is, when that neighborhood all got developed, those blocks were a part of the neighborhood to the south of it. I don't know what you would call that, Ferrero Drive kind of neighborhood.
To the west of the
Langhart,
high school.
Robinson Court. Sorry?
All this area to the west of the high school.
Yes. As opposed to the vibe on March Avenue and how those, mostly apartments and higher density were developed similarly. So to me, those two blocks seemed out of sync with where we put them into.
You're still going to end up with one side of the street in one and the other side in the other.
Of Monte Vista.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is your fix over here?
Well, I haven't proposed it yet because I just wanted to know if this was even on the table for discussion.
It makes sense in terms of the cohesiveness of the neighborhoods. I see what you're doing. So, I mean, it's a worthwhile exercise. I don't see a solution right up front, but maybe we can, you kind of have to go through all the districts to get everything even out, right? When you do something like this.
Remember, there's moves can be done because the population's fine. That's just a move.
Yeah.
Or a shift. A swap can happen between two districts or a rotation when it's multiple districts. But if the councilwoman can identify like an area along this perimeter with the yellow that she wants to move into yellow, then we could find ourselves balancing. This would be where to get it from, or that block. That would undo the argument from earlier. So getting one of these blocks along Healdsburg Avenue into the yellow would do it without making a big rotation.
And I probably wouldn't want to touch the downtown section. So the bottom half of turquoise, I probably wouldn't want to move into yellow because the whole goal of this map was that we have 3 districts that are all encompassing part of the CD and the downtown. But I do think there could be an argument for something along the Healdsburg Avenue on the north of Grant that could come over to the West District.
Why are you wanting to move those? Just because, I mean, this seems like sort of like really getting into a granular look at that little neighborhood. Couldn't that same issue be everywhere else in the city where the newer houses and the older houses are built? I guess my question is what do you want to achieve with this?
Besides to drive you crazy,
Well, that's working.
So if we do the conversation we did earlier, like the SAT question, is this more like this than this is like this? Okay. Are these 2 pill-shaped census blocks here, these like 2 halves of a pill here, are they more like the green or the turquoise? And then this more like the yellow? That would balance.
I mean, I think that's really where I think this process should
Or that would
go at this
balance.
point is that we made these kind of like wide sweeping chunky districts, but some of them based on how the city was developed or how the neighborhoods have character, some of them will require more nuanced decision now that we're kind of narrowed ourselves into a map, as opposed to being like, we cut it up, it's like the difference between, slapping paint on a wall versus, really starting to get clear about the detail. And so I think as we've identified kind of narrowing in on the detail of this map and moving in a direction, we should look at where did we maybe make some big cuts that don't totally make sense with the nuance of the neighborhood.
Well, I'm looking at Google Earth on here, and that section to me seems pretty, I feel like it would fit with the yellow. I don't think it's like a jarring difference. To me, it seems like the same as splitting Monte Vista versus splitting Alexandria Drive. And, the homes on either side of Monte Vista, in fact, that was the last street I knocked on during the last campaign. Yeah. They're similar on both sides, that whole neighborhood. So to me, whether we go split it north-south Monte Vista, north-south Alexandria Drive, I don't think is that huge of an impact. And yeah, that's just kind of my take on it.
Okay. Definitely not a hill I need to die on. It's just more of where did we make decisions in this map that maybe we should, just make sure are really reflective of each.
This
pocket.
goes to like, if we had our way, this neighborhood, but we saw these census blocks, even in Parkland Farms. My street is split really weird, where the neighbors behind me are in the same census block as me, but not across the street. And it's like, none of that makes sense. And so we're kind of forced based on how the census blocks are made up, but this one doesn't seem like it's that out of the ordinary in terms of.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with it. I can't see a section of that turquoise district becoming yellow that makes sense. It seems, it just doesn't make sense. As much sense as it is keeping those two pill-shaped neighborhoods in the yellow. So
I agree.
Agree.
Okay. Anything further that you want to drive us crazy?
No, there's plenty. I have a whole list, but I'll park it for now. It's good.
Well, I kind of feel like it'd be great to have this and be able to spend some time with it before we have the final conversation in 2 weeks, 4 weeks, I guess. I think we talk about, you asked about sequencing, that's at the next meeting?
It's probably best to do it the next meeting because we don't want to get into the open book conversation necessarily here about where people live and so on. If you adopt a map, then I think you can even have the staff draft up a resolution with different sequencing so that you can just select the one that matches what you want.
Great.
So we're good with moving this one forward? Just this one? Yes, okay. Do we need to was that just direction? This is direction. Okay. So there's the direction. Map A. Okay. Everybody's good with that? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This isn't easy, is it? Yeah. We cleared the room yet again, except for the poor folks who have to stay.
that's a marker of really intelligent political debate.
Yeah, nobody knows. Well, we're on Zoom though. So moving on then to old business, we don't have any. We don't have any new business. So council reports on matters of interest occurring since the previous regular meeting. Who would like to start? Yeah. Ron, you want to start?
Just the parade.
Hey, that was quick. Let's get home, right? Vice Mayor, do you want to? Councilmember Hagley.
I participated in Read Across America, which was great. That was fun. I attended just the first part, the Lothian Youth Perspective. I couldn't stay for the whole time because I had to go get Jackson from his baseball practice. And I think that was it. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. How about you, Councilmember Kelly?
Yes, so I had my first Coastal Commission hearing. I am our local government representative for the North Central Coast region and had my first meeting last week. And it is a very honor getting to represent this region on that body. So had that meeting last week. And then also, we had a Sonoma County Transportation Authority, Regional Climate Protection Authority meeting, talked through a couple of the upcoming funding cycles that are going to be happening. So that'll be an exciting conversation to figure out what can we get funded in this next cycle, what money will be there, and how do we bring home those resources to Healdsburg. So I'll update you as the sausage is being made there. And also attended the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition Advocacy Day on Saturday when I got to tout all of the amazing projects that we have in the pipeline of the Healdsburg Complete Streets Project and Grove Street and Ward Street. So and there was actually a bunch of Healdsburgers in the room at that event. And then obviously today's St. Patrick's Day event. I did want to put something forward for potential conversation at a future council meeting. So a while back, we made the decision to remove Zoom public comment. And now with the new Brown Act provisions, which I found out at our last council meeting when norovirus struck my household hard, that we cannot participate under the emergency Brown Act provisions from home remotely if we don't allow Zoom public comment. So the Brown Act does allow for participation remotely by council members as long as there can be remote participation from the public. I think I'm getting the rules right. So my question for the council is, is there an interest to revisit allowing for Zoom public comment as a part of our protocol? And by doing so, we would then allow for the emergency provisions under the Brown Act to apply to Healdsburg for when you have the interest in participating remotely as a council member, but not 72 hours notice to where you could publish your location to be able to participate remotely.
I think I would be fine to have that as a consideration during our goal setting to see where it fits. There's no sense of urgency from my side on that one.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, the question of urgency, I guess, is up in there, but I do want to say there certainly is a lot of folks in the community who would like to see Zoom started, and presumably that discussion would include a review of, what tools are available to us legally to handle problem calls. And so I'm really interested in getting that all up to date and tackling that question. But goal setting is right around the corner. Maybe that's a good time for it. It should be all right.
Yeah, I think goal setting and I'm just seeing still sporadically that those cities that do open up still have problems. I mean, it's like they are looking for cities. So it'd be great if we could do it and not tell anybody except our residents. I don't know, put it in the utility bill. Here's your, I don't know how we could work that out, but I would consider talking about it in goal setting.
Yeah, I would agree. Anything else?
I had one other question. Given that we are located directly on the Russian River and that in the past Healdsburg has supported political statements of supporting Ukraine, and given everything that has transpired on our national international policy, I'm curious if the council has an interest in, because we have a bridge lighting policy that allows the mayor, if the council majority wants to have a conversation about it, to light the bridge up in support of Ukraine. Would the council be interested in having that conversation at an upcoming council meeting to be able to support our historic stance in supporting Ukraine as a country and as a city that is adjacent to the Russian River?
Vice Mayor?
It's an important conversation, but I'm reminded of a suggestion from the mayor, maybe a couple months ago, that we really need to kind of do a deep dive in terms of what our policy is as a council and for future councils in terms of, local versus national political stuff. And it's a big conversation, and it's going to be very nuanced and maybe controversial, but I think that's a really important conversation to have. So I'd like that conversation to happen first, but I know that this is the timely thing, but that's kind of where I'm at with that one.
I think right now you can't drive across the bridge without seeing the Ukraine flags that have been popped up, which is very nice to see. So I think we are already expressing, our community is expressing how they feel about it without us diving into national issues. But I do smile every time I see those Ukraine flags on the bridge, and my neighbors.
Councilmember Higley, do you have something to say?
I prefer to stay out of the national politics.
I do too. It's interesting, and the whole flag policy came out of the bridge being lit without the council being aware, and it created all kinds of interesting questions. But I think maybe, we talked about the council protocols at goal setting, and this could be part of that. What kind of stance do we want to take, or should we take any at all as a local small community? So I'd prefer to see us not. I don't think there's any urgency to do it either. I don't want us to do this in a rushed fashion in any way. The conversation, though, I think is goal setting as well. I think it's worth it to talk about protocols. So. Yeah. Anything else? So I went to the parade today. I think everybody else did too, right? I also had an opportunity to talk to the folks at Senior Living Facility here in Healdsburg, and that was fun. They're a tough audience, I got to tell you. They have hard questions and didn't really smile a lot, but it was interesting. They're really great people. And I went to a meeting at Craftwork that they were doing for startup companies, and I got invited to that, and City Manager Kay was there as well. And then Board of Directors of the SCMA was held in Cloverdale, and James Gore presented some information to us. So that was really interesting. It'll come back to the full council members meeting in a month or two, whenever the next one comes. So that's it.
I've got
All
my
right.
list now.
I
found my list
found-
in my head.
you have more?
I got some stuff, yeah. Well, a couple of us were at the Good Morning Healdsburg thing with the chamber, and heard a great presentation from Chief Boaz. Looking forward to getting our own version of that here soon. I also participated into, what's the name of the program where we read to the kids?
Read Across America.
Read Across America, thank you. So much fun. I love doing that. And I went to the Library Advisory Board meeting and heard a presentation from the Alliance Center. And interesting to hear their take on concerns with the immigrant community, and many other issues. And I think a lot of us have heard from them, but what an amazing asset we have in our community over there. It's always good to get a refresh on that. I went to the Parks and Rec Commission, and they approved their goals for the year. Very thoughtful set of goals. And there was an interesting discussion about the deferred maintenance and budgeting for that. And I reminded them that they, as individuals, could be talking to us when the budget comes around to make sure that that's a priority. So I appreciate that was still afloat with those folks. I also met with Amy Rodriguez at the Healthcare Foundation, and she's going to do a presentation for us here sometime soon. She did one at the Parks Commission, so I got that presentation twice, and it's awesome, and it has to do with the multicultural center changes that are coming to the Abel de Luna Center. So I look forward to that. Parade, awesome, good time. Thank God it didn't rain. We really lucked out. Thanks to everybody who showed up. Those are the mighty brave fewer than usual, but still a great turnout, I thought. And then I also helped with Rotary and the Russian River Keeper and rundu removal activities on the Russian River. And that's it's a lot of work. It's very gratifying. It's a great bunch of people. It's important work. And I can't wait to have you guys join me someday. So I'll keep trying.
Thank you. Yes, you were busy. Yeah. So, okay. So